British crime films from the 1950s don't always sparkle with glamour, and that's exactly why they hit harder. Forget the Hollywood polish. These thrillers are built from grit, smoke, and desperation, the kind that seeps into your bones. But here's the thing. Most of them slipped under the radar, buried by time and bigger names. What if the real heartbeat of British noir has been hiding in plain sight all along? Let's unlock the vault. The Blue Lamp, 1950. Think all British cops were buttoned-up gentlemen with a calm word and a firm handshake? The Blue Lamp smashed that illusion wide open. Directed by Basil Dearden, this film pulled audiences straight into post-war London, where crime didn't wait politely for the law to catch up. The story begins with the death of veteran police officer George Dixon, a character so iconic that his shadow would stretch across British television for decades. But on the big screen, his fate was anything but heroic. The Blue Lamp wasn't about clever crooks or stylish heists. It was about how violent crime was ripping into everyday life. The killer, played with chilling detachment by Dirk Bogarde, wasn't a theatrical mastermind but a jittery young thug with a gun. That realism struck a nerve, especially in 1950 when post-war Britain was trying to rebuild but couldn't escape the undercurrent of unrest. Cinemas weren't used to showing cops as vulnerable, but Dearden stripped away the myth and left the audience staring at something uncomfortably real. The film also gave birth to one of the longest-running British TV shows ever, Dixon of Dock Green. But on television, Dixon lived on as the friendly face of the police. In The Blue Lamp, he died in the line of duty, reminding viewers that justice had a price. That contrast alone made the film unforgettable for those who saw it. Why isn't it remembered more today? Probably because its television offspring softened its rough edges. But the original film is the one that dared to confront the fragility of order in a city on edge. A crime thriller that still resonates, even if it refuses to let you feel safe. Pool of London, 1951. Imagine London's docks at night, fog curling around the ships, shadows moving where shadows shouldn't, and a cargo of secrets hiding in every crate. That's the world of Pool of London, a film that mixed smuggling, danger, and something even rarer for its time, a romance that broke boundaries. Directed again by Basil Dearden, this thriller was as bold as it was atmospheric, diving into a part of London few films dared to explore. The plot follows two merchant seamen who stumble into a diamond smuggling operation. One of them, played by Earl Cameron, also finds himself drawn into a relationship with a white woman, a storyline nearly unheard of in British cinema at the time. While the smuggling plot kept audiences hooked, it was this subplot that gave the film its haunting power. It wasn't just about crime, it was about society's unspoken rules and the cost of breaking them. Visually, the film made London's riverfront a character of its own. The cranes, warehouses, and night streets pulsed with menace and opportunity. Unlike slick American noirs, Pool of London felt grounded in real working-class struggles. Every deal, every betrayal carried the weight of survival, not glamour. Earl Cameron's performance, understated yet magnetic, marked a turning point for representation on screen, even if critics at the time barely acknowledged it. Why does this film deserve a second look? Because it was decades ahead of its time, balancing suspense with social commentary. It dared to say that crime wasn't just about money or greed, it was about the walls people built between themselves. And in that sense, it's a crime thriller that hits you long after the credits roll. London never looked the same again after this one. The Long Dark Hall, 1951. If you think courtroom dramas are tidy affairs, The Long Dark Hall is here to rattle your nerves. This crime thriller takes you into a murder trial, where everything hinges on circumstantial evidence, and the truth is as murky as the fog outside Old Bailey. Directed by Reginald Beck and Anthony Bushell, it's the kind of film that shows how easily justice can slip through trembling fingers. The story centers on Arthur Groom, played by Rex Harrison, a married man whose fleeting encounter with a nightclub performer turns into a nightmare when she's found dead. Circumstantial evidence stacks against him, and suddenly, Groom is fighting for his life in a trial that feels more like a trap than a path to truth. Harrison, usually known for polished charm, delivers a performance laced with fear and desperation, making the audience squirm as the courtroom closes in. What makes The Long Dark Hall gripping isn't flashy twists, but the sheer sense of inevitability. Every witness, every lawyer's argument tightens the noose, until you're left wondering whether innocence matters at all when public opinion has already passed judgment. The film is quiet, almost understated, yet it throbs with unease. It's not the kind of crime thriller that gives you a clever resolution. It leaves you with doubt, lingering long after the credits. In 1951, audiences might have expected heroes and villains to be drawn in clean lines. This film threw that expectation into the shadows. Was Groom guilty, or was he just in the wrong place at the wrong time? That uncertainty is the point. The Long Dark Hall shows how justice can be blind, but not always fair. And in doing so, it carved out a space in crime cinema that feels alarmingly modern. Hunted 1952. Few crime thrillers of the 1950s had the raw emotional tension of Hunted. Also released as The Stranger in Between, this film pairs Dirk Bogarde, already carving a reputation as one of Britain's most magnetic actors, with a young boy who becomes both burden and lifeline. Directed by Charles Crichton, the film is a fugitive story, but it's also a psychological duel set against a grim post-war backdrop. Bogarde plays Chris Lloyd, a man who lashes out in violence and finds himself on the run. His problem? A young boy witnesses his crime. Instead of silencing the witness, Lloyd drags him along as he flees across the bleak industrial landscapes of Britain. What unfolds is more than a chase. It's a tense, uneasy relationship between a desperate criminal and a child who slowly shifts from liability to companion. Cinematography does half the storytelling here. Smoke-stained skylines, railway yards, and crumbling buildings mirror the characters' frayed edges. The tension doesn't just come from police closing in, but from the constant threat simmering between man and boy. Will Lloyd snap? Will the boy betray him? Or has something more complicated begun to grow between them? The unease is relentless. Bogarde's performance is the heart of it. Volatile, magnetic, unpredictable. One moment you fear him, the next you pity him. The child actor, John Whiteley, gives the film surprising weight, refusing to play just a wide-eyed innocent. Together, they create a story that feels as much about survival and broken trust as it does about crime. Hunted wasn't made to reassure audiences. It was made to unsettle them, showing how violence corrupts everything it touches, even the bonds that form in desperation. That's why it's unforgettable, and why it deserves to be rediscovered as one of the grittiest crime thrillers of its decade. The Gentle Gunman, 1952. Crime thrillers often stick to bank robbers, con men, or killers, but The Gentle Gunman charged into controversial territory. The IRA operating in London. Directed by Basil Dearden, it's not a film about tidy resolutions. It's about divided loyalties, moral compromise, and how politics seeps into the personal. That was a risky move in 1952, and maybe that's why the film has been overlooked for so long. The story follows brothers played by Dirk Bogarde and John Mills, both IRA members hiding out in London. But they're not united. One brother is weary of violence, while the other clings to the mission, convinced that bombs and bullets are the only answer. This tension creates the heartbeat of the film. Family love strained to breaking by ideology. Their arguments, their silences, and their betrayals make the film more gripping than any chase scene. Dearden shoots London not as glamorous or mysterious, but as a city weighed down by suspicion. Every pub corner could hide an informer. Every whispered deal could be a trap. Unlike thrillers that revel in action, The Gentle Gunman thrives on paranoia. The threat of violence looms heavier than the violence itself. And when it finally comes, it doesn't feel cinematic. It feels inevitable and tragic. Dirk Bogarde shines here, not as a dashing star, but as a man torn apart, caught between duty and conscience. John Mills delivers equal force, embodying the stubborn conviction that refuses to bend. Together, they anchor a film that dares to show crime not just as personal greed, but as a clash of belief and blood. Why did it fade into obscurity? Maybe audiences weren't ready for a thriller that stared straight at uncomfortable realities. But that's exactly why it matters. The Gentle Gunman reminds us that crime stories aren't always about outlaws versus the law. Sometimes they're about brothers at war, and that's a battle no courtroom can resolve. The Yellow Balloon, 1953. Some thrillers strike fear with gangsters and guns. The Yellow Balloon does it with a child, holding on to a secret he can't carry. Directed by J. Lee Thompson, this crime thriller begins with something as innocent as a toy balloon floating through the streets of post-war London, and ends with a boy entangled in a web of guilt, fear, and crime he never asked for. It's a rare film that reminds you danger doesn't always arrive with a pistol. It can creep in quietly, almost by accident. The story follows young Frankie, played with wide-eyed intensity by Andrew Ray. After a tragic accident involving a friend, Frankie becomes easy prey for a criminal, played by William Sylvester. This isn't a hardened villain chasing glory. He's a manipulator who sees opportunity in the boy's silence and fear. That power imbalance drives the film, making every scene tighter, every silence heavier. The London locations, scarred from wartime bombing, add to the sense of vulnerability. This isn't a playground, it's a minefield of secrets. J. Lee Thompson directs with a sharp sense of suspense, turning alleyways, rooftops, and cramped flats into stages for fear. What makes The Yellow Balloon stand out is how it refuses to comfort the audience. A child is trapped, a predator closes in, and innocence itself becomes the battlefield. This wasn't the polished escapism viewers expected in 1953. It was unvarnished, nerve-rattling drama. Why did it fade into obscurity? Perhaps it was too unsettling, too unwilling to protect its audience from the cruelty of chance. But that's what makes it brilliant. The Yellow Balloon is a reminder that sometimes the scariest crime thrillers don't start with hardened criminals. They start with the ordinary and spiral into darkness before you even realize the trap has been sprung. The Good Die, Young, 1954. By the mid-1950s, heist thrillers were already finding their rhythm, but The Good Die Young threw a wrench into the formula. Directed by Lewis Gilbert, this film didn't focus on the mechanics of a robbery as much as the broken men who risk everything to pull it off. It's not slick, it's not glamorous, it's desperate, sweaty, and doomed from the start. And that's what makes it unforgettable. The setup is simple. 4 men from different backgrounds are lured into a payroll heist. But these aren't charming rogues. They're ordinary men on the edge of collapse. There's Stanley Baker as the embittered ex-boxer, Lawrence Harvey as the cold, calculating schemer, Richard Basehart as a man drowning in personal ruin, and John Ireland as a veteran unable to find peace. Each brings a different weight to the story, and together they create a powder keg of mistrust. You know from the first act that this won't end well, but you can't look away as the fuse burns down. What elevates The Good Die Young is how personal it feels. Every character's choice is rooted in real frustration, marriages falling apart, money pressures, lives coming undone. When they band together, it's not loyalty driving them, it's shared desperation. And when the plan unravels, as all doomed plans do, the fallout is brutal, not stylish. The violence is raw, and the sense of waste hangs over the entire film like cigarette smoke in a pub. Why didn't it become a classic? Maybe because it didn't flatter the audience. There's no clever mastermind pulling strings, no heroic getaway, just ordinary men crumbling under pressure. But that honesty is exactly what makes The Good Die Young so gripping. It's a film that doesn't just show crime, it shows the ruin that pushes people into it and the ruin it leaves behind. A true 1950s gut punch. The Sleeping Tiger, 1954. What happens when you invite danger into your home and call it an experiment? The Sleeping Tiger, directed by Joseph Losey in his British exile years, dared to ask that question. And the answer is as unsettling as you'd expect. This isn't just a crime thriller, it's a psychological chess game wrapped in noir shadows. And it simmers with tension from the very first frame. The story introduces Frank Clemens, played by Dirk Bogarde, a criminal given a chance at rehabilitation by a psychiatrist, Dr. Clive Esmond. Instead of prison, Clemens moves into Esmond's home under the watchful eye of both the doctor and his wife. That setup alone is dripping with unease, an ex-con living among his captors, studied like a specimen. But as the days pass, the line between subject and manipulator begins to blur. Who is really in control here? The psychiatrist, the criminal, or the wife caught in the middle? Visually, The Sleeping Tiger is steeped in noir influence. shadows crawl across walls, rooms feel more like cages, and silence stretches longer than is comfortable. Bogard delivers a performance that's both magnetic and dangerous, charming one moment, volatile the next. He embodies the very idea of a sleeping tiger, unpredictable and ready to pounce. Joseph Losey, working under the radar due to Hollywood's blacklist, brought an outsider's perspective that gave the film an extra layer of menace. What makes this film unforgettable is the moral ambiguity at its core. Rehabilitation, manipulation, attraction, it all swirls together until you're not sure where sympathy ends and danger begins. Why is it overlooked today? Likely because it doesn't play by simple genre rules. It's a thriller that chooses tension over action, psychology over spectacle. But if you want a film that makes your nerves buzz with unease, The Sleeping Tiger deserves its place in the conversation. The Brain Machine, 1955. You've probably never heard of The Brain Machine, and that's exactly why it deserves your attention. Directed by Ken Hughes, this low-budget British crime thriller didn't come with flashy stars or expensive sets. What it had was atmosphere, paranoia, and a story that dug deeper than its modest means. Sometimes the forgotten films are the ones that slip closest to the bone. The premise seems straightforward. A group of criminals plot a robbery. But The Brain Machine isn't about the heist. It's about the psychological games that come before and after. Hughes, who would later go on to bigger projects, crafted a tight, claustrophobic thriller that plays less like a glossy crime caper and more like a pressure cooker. Every character is a bundle of nerves. Every plan is laced with mistrust, and the cracks start to show long before the robbery even begins. Visually, the film leans into its limitations. Sparse sets, tight framing, and long shadows give it a stripped-down style that feels closer to experimental noir than mainstream entertainment. It forces you to focus on the characters, their lies, their desperation, their inevitable implosion. You don't watch The Brain Machine for slick action. You watch it for the gnawing sense that no one in this story will come out clean. Why has it been forgotten? Maybe because it lacked star power. Maybe because it was too grim for audiences looking for tidy entertainment in the 1950s. But hidden inside its rough edges is something raw and fascinating, a reminder that crime thrillers don't need big budgets to leave scars. The Brain Machine proves that tension, when done right, can feel sharper than any weapon. Cast a Dark Shadow, 1955. Dirk Bogarde makes his third appearance on this list, and for good reason. In Cast a Dark Shadow, he gives one of his most chilling performances, playing a man whose charm is as dangerous as a knife in the dark. Directed by Lewis Gilbert, this thriller isn't about gangsters or heists. It's about a killer hiding in plain sight, wearing a smile instead of a mask. Bogarde plays Teddy Bear, a young man who marries older women, only to dispose of them when they've outlived their usefulness. It's not played as sensationalist shock, it's played as cold, methodical greed. What makes Teddy so terrifying isn't just what he does, but how ordinary he pretends to be. Watching Bogarde flip from false affection to cold calculation is like watching ice form across a window. You see it creeping, but you can't stop it. The film's atmosphere is suffocating. The settings are intimate, drawing rooms, parlors, quiet English houses. Yet the sense of danger fills every corner. Instead of smoky bars or city streets, the battleground here is domestic life, making the betrayals cut even deeper. Margaret Lockwood and Kay Walsh deliver strong supporting roles as women who either fall for or see through Teddy's act, giving the story an added layer of tension. Why does Cast a Dark Shadow still sting decades later? Because it feels uncomfortably real. It strips away the glamour of crime and replaces it with quiet menace, violence lurking behind a handshake and a kind word. Maybe it was overlooked because audiences weren't ready to confront that kind of villain in their own living rooms. But make no mistake, this is one of the sharpest, coldest British crime thrillers of the 1950s, and it deserves to be remembered as such. Footsteps in the Fog, 1955. Some crime thrillers are loud and brutal. Footsteps in the Fog is quiet, elegant, and twice as deadly. Directed by Arthur Lubin, this Victorian set thriller stars Stuart Granger and Gene Simmons, in a story that proves ambition and blackmail can be as dangerous as any blade. It's a period piece that masquerades as a costume drama, but beneath the polished manners lurks cruelty of the darkest sort. Granger plays Stephen Lowry, a respectable gentleman with a not-so-respectable secret. He's poisoned his wealthy wife. Enter Lily Watkins, played by Simmons, his maid, who discovers the truth and sees an opportunity. But she's not looking for justice. She wants leverage. Lily begins to manipulate Stephen, tightening her grip as he grows more desperate. What follows is a tense, twisted dance of blackmail, obsession, and inevitable downfall. The film's greatest strength is its atmosphere. London's fog, gaslit streets, and shadowy interiors create a world where every corner could hide betrayal. Granger delivers menace cloaked in charm, while Simmons plays Lily with sharp intelligence. She's not just a victim of circumstance, she's an active participant, using knowledge as her weapon. Watching the two circle each other is like watching predators share the same cage, waiting for the moment one strikes. Why isn't Footsteps in the Fog talked about alongside the greats? Perhaps because period crime dramas rarely get the same recognition as modern ones. But this film proves that crime isn't tied to an era. Greed, betrayal, and fear are timeless. Footsteps in the Fog is a reminder that sometimes the most sinister crimes are committed in silence, with a smile, while the fog outside smothers the truth. Tiger in the Smoke, 1956. London fog isn't just weather, it's menace. It's mood. It's the perfect stage for danger. Tiger in the Smoke, directed by Roy Ward Baker, takes full advantage of that atmosphere, spinning a crime thriller that feels like a nightmare come to life. Based on Marjorie Allingham's novel, this is a film where the city itself becomes a character, hostile, confusing, and full of shadows that seem to move on their own. The story centers on Meg Elginbrode, a young woman thought to be widowed, only to receive a shocking message suggesting her husband may still be alive. That single spark ignites a trail of mystery and menace, drawing in Albert Campion, the amateur detective, and a killer known only as the Tiger. The plot moves through churches, alleys, and fog-bound streets, with the tension never letting up. Every step feels like it could lead straight into a trap. What sets Tiger in the Smoke apart is its mood. The fog is more than a backdrop. It's a character that isolates, blinds, and swallows hope whole. The villain is chillingly effective, not a flamboyant mastermind, but a raw, relentless presence. The pacing builds like a tightening vice, with no room for comfort or escape. It's crime storytelling stripped to its essentials: fear, pursuit, and the inevitability of violence. Why is it overlooked today? Maybe because it doesn't fit neatly into the detective genre. It's not tidy, it's not reassuring, and it doesn't care about delivering easy answers. But that's exactly what makes it powerful. Tiger in the Smoke is the kind of film that sticks in your head long after, reminding you that sometimes the most frightening monsters aren't hiding in the dark. They're walking straight through the fog toward you. Time Without Pity, 1957. Ticking clocks are a thriller's best friend, and Time Without Pity makes every second count. Directed by Joseph Luzzi, this film is both a nail-biting crime story and a sharp political statement. Michael Redgrave stars as David Graham, a father racing against time to save his son from execution for a murder he didn't commit. The setup is simple, but the execution, pun intended, is pure dread. David isn't a detective, he's not a lawyer, he's just a man desperate to clear his son's name. That makes his journey even more harrowing because he's out of his depth, clawing at leads while the clock keeps ticking. Luzzi directs with urgency, emphasizing the oppressive weight of time. Every shot feels like it's running out of breath, every scene a reminder that hope is slipping away. Redgrave gives the role both dignity and desperation, embodying a man who refuses to quit even as the walls close in. What makes Time Without Pity stand out is its refusal to play safe. It's not just about one man's struggle, it's a scathing critique of capital punishment, wrapped in the clothing of a crime thriller. That political edge may be part of why it was overshadowed at the time. Audiences wanted suspense. Luzzi gave them suspense with a message that hit too close to home. The ending, when it comes, is both inevitable and devastating, leaving viewers shaken rather than comforted. Why did it fade from mainstream memory? Maybe because it's uncomfortable, refusing to flatter its audience or hand them easy victories. But if you want a 1950s thriller that combines the tension of a ticking clock with the power of social critique, Time Without Pity is essential viewing. It's not just suspenseful, it's unforgettable. Hell Drivers, 1957. Forget jewel heists and shadowy masterminds. Hell Drivers takes the crime thriller into the mud, grit, and danger of everyday labor. Directed by Cy Enfield, this is one of the rawest British films of the decade, plunging into the brutal world of truck drivers competing in a system designed to break them. It's crime on the ground level, where survival itself is the gamble. Stanley Baker stars as Tom Yateley, an ex-con trying to go straight, who takes a job hauling gravel for a corrupt company. But this isn't steady work. It's a cutthroat contest, where drivers are pushed to dangerous speeds for pitiful pay. The company pits them against each other, and soon Tom finds himself squaring off against Red, the ruthless top driver played with menace by a young Patrick McGoohan. Add in supporting performances from Herbert Lom and a pre-fame Sean Connery, and you've got a cast packed with intensity. What makes Hell Drivers unforgettable is its physicality. The truck races are filmed with bone-shaking realism, every turn threatening to send a vehicle flipping into disaster. The mud, the grit, the claustrophobic cabs, it all feels dangerously real. But beneath the adrenaline is a story about exploitation. The bosses profit from chaos, and the drivers pay the price with their lives. It's less about outlaw crime and more about systemic corruption, the kind that grinds men down and dares them to push back. Why has it been overlooked? Perhaps because it's too raw, too bleak, too unwilling to dress up its thrills with polish. But that honesty is what makes it powerful. Hell Drivers isn't just a crime thriller, it's a howl of anger from the working class. A story that proves sometimes the most dangerous roads aren't in the underworld, but on the highways right in front of us. Sapphire, 1959. By the end of the decade, British crime cinema pulled no punches with Sapphire. Directed by Basil Dearden, this film begins with the murder of a young woman, but quickly reveals it's not just a whodunit. It's a mirror held up to the racial tensions bubbling under the surface of 1950s London. That makes it both a gripping thriller and a landmark piece of social commentary. The story kicks off with the discovery of Sapphire Robin's body on Hampstead Heath. At first, it seems like a straightforward murder investigation, but as detectives peel back the layers, they discover Sapphire was of mixed race, a fact hidden from many of her friends and acquaintances. Suddenly, the crime isn't just about one victim. It's about the prejudice, suspicion, and fear woven into the society around her. Every witness becomes a suspect, not just in the crime itself, but in the culture that made such a crime possible. Visually, the film balances classic thriller pacing with stark realism. Dearden avoids glamorization, focusing instead on the uneasy interactions between characters. Nigel Patrick and Michael Craig anchor the cast as detectives trying to navigate a case where every answer leads to uglier truths. The film forces viewers to confront uncomfortable realities about identity and bias, long before such topics were widely explored in mainstream cinema. Why was Sapphire overlooked by many? Likely because it cut too deep. It wasn't just about a murder, it was about a society fractured by race and fear. Themes audiences in 1959 weren't ready to face head-on. But that's what makes it essential. Sapphire isn't just a thriller, it's a warning, a reminder that the darkest crimes often come from prejudice itself, a bold, biting close to the decade. So, there you have it. 15 British crime thrillers from the 1950s that dared to go darker, grittier, and bolder than their reputation suggests. These aren't just films, they're warnings, experiments, and gut punches disguised as entertainment. Which one surprised you the most? Drop your pick in the comments, and let's see how many hidden gems we can bring back into the spotlight. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because crime cinema, this good should never stay forgotten.